All right, a special welcome to everyone. Having recently celebrated our 100th anniversary, we invite you to pick up a copy of Thomas Balch Library's history. Copies of the current Balch column, which will be updated in January, are on the back table listing programs and other events and other informative literature about the library. Please help yourself. We're happy to mail it to any of you who are online and would like to have a copy. Just send us an email and we'll mail it to you. Events are posted on our website and on social media. The water fountain is out the door to your left. The restrooms are straight back. If anyone has an electronic device, if you will please at this time either turn off or mute, we would certainly appreciate it. Everyone in the room would appreciate it. Masks are not required if anybody happens to want one. We do have some that I can make available for you. Please remember, there is a virtual audience. The event is being recorded and will be published on the library's YouTube. The link will be made available to those who have registered for the class and provided us with an email address. Those of you who are attending virtually may ask questions by posting in the chat box, and staff will monitor that and ask the questions probably at the end. It is my pleasure to welcome back our guest speaker, Wynne Saffer. A lifelong Loudoun resident, Saffer will discuss how to locate places and show how to convert a meets and bounds survey to a plat of property. He will show examples of plats, explain how to identify their location by using geographic landmarks, and will demonstrate use of current parcel maps to locate ancient property lines. Saffer has completed numerous local research projects, mapped the county by land ownership in 1860, and written several books about Loudoun's history, including Loudoun Votes, 1867 to 1966, a Civil War legacy, and he's also written Mount Zion Cemetery in Loudoun, Virginia. Saffer is a recipient of the Thomas Balch Library's Loudoun History Award. Please join me in welcoming Saffer.
Thank you all for coming. Wanted to make a personal removal from today's program, though. If anybody recognizes what this is, can you see the title on there? And why do I have that here today? Pearl Harbor. 82 years ago was Pearl Harbor. This is the USS Arizona, our model of it. And the memorial that's today in Hawaii is pictured on the back of this model box. I bring that particularly today because as I came in today, I thought about my friend John Devine. He's named for one of the rooms upstairs in the front of the library, the John Devine room. John was served in the U.S. Army in World War II, and that's where he met his wife, Mac. And her actual name is Bernice, but everybody called her Mac. I think her last name was McDonald, so that's where the Mac came from. But I mentioned Mac because she was John's wife, but also because her brother was a sailor in the U.S. Navy serving on the Arizona. And his remains rest at Pearl Harbor today, to the best of my knowledge. He went down with the ship in Pearl Harbor in 1941. So there's a little history and genealogy put together, and that gives you a connection here to the Balch Library. All right, I got two handouts in the back of the room. I hope you all were able to pick those up. They'll be on the slides later, but I want you to be able to take them with you when you finish. I probably won't be referring to them too much other than when they're on the slide up there. But anyway, Alexander gave you a little introduction, but I wanted to give you a little more introduction about my background and being able to do this and how I started doing it. In around 1997, I started trying to map property in 1860 in Loudoun County. Loudoun was divided into three assessment districts in 1860. Jonah Tavener, George Fox, and Thomas Wren. And so I started with Wren's district, which was Eastern Loudoun County, and did that first. And then after that, I did Tavener's district, and then I did Fox's district after that. So I've tried to map the parcels in Loudoun County in 1860. They didn't start parcel maps in Loudoun County until about 1960, so I was told. So there's no, with these parcel maps that I did, they were creating something new that didn't exist prior. So that gave me some experience in mapping. I've also done Fauquier County. I've done Clark County, and I've done the upper half of Prince William County. And I was working on Warren County back in 2022. When the price of gas got up to about $5, I said, no, I'm not going to Front Royal at $5 a gallon. So I stopped working on that project. So maybe at some point I'll restart my Warren County project and try to get that finished up. The Loudoun maps are in the library here, and so is the Fauquier maps. The Prince William maps are available in the Prince William Library, Central Library in Manassas. And the Clark County maps that I finished up, which I brought with me, are in the Clark County Historical Society in Berryville. So I've had a lot of experience. I've also mapped land grants in Loudoun County and in Fauquier County. And a lot of people like to map land grants because they all have surveys in them. Now, I'm not a professional surveyor, but I'm going to talk some about surveying today. So if any of you in the audience have surveying experience and I say something incorrect, please feel free to interject and say, no, that's not right. So anyway, but I'm going to talk about surveying as we go through the program today. But that's given me a lot of experience getting old surveys and converting them to plats and putting them on a USGS topographical map. All right, we're going to talk about land surveying in brief. And then we're going to show how you create a plat from the meets and bounds survey to deal with locating plats using the USGS quad map and locating plats using current property lines. I originally gave this presentation in 2014. And when I got to the fourth example there, the current parcel lines, I went down to Loudoun County government office, the mapping office, and got tiles for certain parts of the county. The county is set up into a grid system, and they can print out a tile for each one. But the thing you always have to do with this technique I'm going to show you about using the property maps is you have to make sure the scale of your plat is the same scale as your map. I had a friend, Louisa Hutchison, that actually was platting on top of aerial photos. So you can do that as well. But again, you always have to make sure the scale that you're mapping in is the same scale as the map you're putting it on. If it's not, you're going to have issues with it. So anyway, so those are the things we're going to try to cover today. That's one of your handouts. I found that on the internet. I thought it was very nicely drawn. Compass. And then here's a summary of land measurements. That's your other handout. So back in the early days of surveys, everything was measured in poles. Later on, they started using chains. A pole is 16.5 feet, and the chain is 4 poles or 66 feet. Today, they measure in feet. Now, I use a software, and all I have to do is enter P behind the number, and it knows it's so many feet. And the same for chain. I can enter C behind the number, and it converts it to chains. And then the same for feet. I can put an F behind it. So the software I'm going to show you that I use, that actually you don't have to worry about whether it's poles, chains, or feet. You just put that letter behind the number, and it converts. But obviously, when I first started this, I didn't know my software I could put a C behind it. I thought I had to put P behind it. So every time I was dealing with chains, I had to multiply it times 4 to get to how many poles it was. But then I found out the software was smarter than I was, which doesn't take a lot to do. All right. Then an acre, 10 square chains is that many square feet, and a square mile is 640 acres. And Loudoun County is 517 square miles, which is 330,000 acres. Now, when I did the districts, each district is about 1/3 of that. The districts in 1860 were divided, and it's about 100,000 acres. So when I started the project, I wasn't planning to do the whole county, but I had so much fun doing it that I decided I'd keep going. So I separated it into 3 different projects and did it at different times. But that was only a matter of reducing the problem before me to a smaller workable solution. When I did Fauquier County, it's over 400,000 acres, and Clark County is only like 100,000 acres. So Clark is relatively small compared to the others. All right, now Anna, let's see here. Oh, it's starting to do it. There it did. All right. Now I'm going to the flip chart here. Hopefully it won't fall on the floor while I'm writing on it. Draw a straight line and finish it. All right. I want this to be a participatory class. So I've got a cross here. What direction would this be here at the top? No, door. All right. What direction is this? It's sectional class. It's only one, right? Well, the reason I do this to some degree is just to say, when you think about surveying, you know a whole lot already. Surveying is measured in direction and distance. All right. So this is 0 right here, 0 degrees. And this is 90 degrees right here. Okay. So this is a 90-degree angle right there. Make sense? All right. If I drew a line halfway across that, what degrees would that be? 45. All right. And if I'm going in that direction, then what direction is that line? Northeast. North 45 east. All right. Doesn't get much easier than that, does it? So if you want to get into platting, all you need is some graph paper and a survey, and you can convert it to a plat. Now, the simple tools that you need are a protractor and a ruler. That's really all you need is to do that. You have to, as I say, the scale is important to you. If you're going to do that, you have to know the distance that you want your lines to be on the paper that you're working on. Now, I like using the USGS quad maps to overlay my plats on. And about the scale for the USGS quad map, it's the 2400 series. So it's 1 inch equals 2,000 feet. And then they call that the 24,000 series maps. And Loudoun County, there's about 19 of those quad maps that have portions of Loudoun County in it. Fauquier County is about the same. Clark County only has 4 maps. So I used to go to Reston to purchase these maps at the USGS office in Reston. That's the US Geological Survey. But the government decided to conserve their money and close the office. So now when I want the maps, I think there are places that do sell the maps somewhere in Northern Virginia or Washington area, but I order them by phone from Colorado. Now you can go on the website for USGS and see the maps on the website. I'm one of theirs. I'm going to use that on these labels here in a second. This is the Arcola quad. Usually they name the quads for a particular feature that's on there. So Arcola is right here. This is Gilbert's Corner, right over here. And Leesburg is the quad map that's just both of them. This one isn't one of those real nice ones, but today most of the quad maps show the quad maps surrounding the map down here on the bottom. So it'll say this one's in the middle and they'll show each quad that's on the outside of that. So you know what quad maps you're dealing with from the quad map and what's next door. So if your parcel's over here on the side of the quad map and runs over to the next parcel, you know what the next quad map is. But I think this is the primary thing I'm trying to show you is that it's just knowing 0 to 90 degrees. So all the references, if you see something in there that says north 145 east, you probably copied it wrong, or the guy that wrote it down wrong. It should never be higher than 90. And usually if it is 90, they'll say east, or they'll say west. They won't even mention the 90. If it's 89, it'll say north 89 east or south 89 west. And that was the other thing about this line I didn't tell you, but if you're going in this direction, what do you describe the line as? What would you describe it as? Instead of going northeast, you're going this way, southwest. So a call at southwest 45 is the reverse line for this. So it's the same, it could be the same line depending on which direction the surveyor is going. The surveyors go from point to point. Now back to the list I gave you here earlier. Back in the early days, and that's what I've got all this experience in the 1860s, was that they actually used chains back then to measure the distance. The chains had 100 links in them. So 100 links is equal to one chain. And they would actually lay the chains out. When they went out to do the surveys, they had chain carriers to help them take the chains. And they'd use a sextant and shoot a line. And of course, the compass is on there to show them what direction it is. And when I drew this for you here, this was north. When you're dealing with the compass, they use the term magnetic north. True north. Over time, the magnetic poles shift some. And so if you did a survey in 1736 and you did another one in 1780, that same line may have shifted slightly. So if you see a survey that said north 45 degrees east and another that said north 43 degrees east, it could be the same line due to what they call magnetic declination. So shifting of the magnetic pole over time. Now, I'm not a professional surveyor, so I don't know how to deal with that shifting. But when I draw it on a map, the scale is so small, it doesn't really make much difference. Yes?
There's a thing online that you look up and you add degrees to whatever your compass says.
Yes, there are tables that allow you to compensate to that. I think the other thing I was talking to Anna earlier about the other day was that when I'm doing all this work, this is a flat map, two-dimensional. Land is not two-dimensional. Land is three-dimensional. So you have height, elevation, and surveyors have to adjust for that. I don't know how to do that, but I never had to deal with it because I'm always starting with somebody else's survey and putting it on a flat surface. And when I use a flat that maybe a surveyor's drawn up, that's on a flat surface. So how they deal with the elevation, I'm not sure how they offset that. I always say, I don't know how these people with the chains have laid out back in the 1700s when they're out here, it's all trees. How do they get that chain on a straight line when they have trees and they have what they call offsets? They have to go around, yes.
My brother was a chain carrier in the 1970s. They were using chains pretty recently. And they went out with the chain and a guy with a chainsaw and
Cut the tree down so they could get the tree.
With the tree. Well, he was going through, brush. He had to climb through ditches and swamps and
Well,
if you could get the chain and get it, but yeah, if it was in the way, sometimes it just went back down.
I used an expression when I was doing some of this work. I said, I don't think the surveyors like to get their feet wet.
The surveyor was back with the,
A lot of-
back with the sexton, he was fine.
A lot of times. Water courses are property boundaries. Quite often you'll find property boundaries. And what I have found in some of my surveys, which you come to a point on the riverbank. And the next call would be down the stream or up the stream to the next point. You wouldn't have any meets and bounds calls within those 2 points along that stream. And I blame that on the fact I didn't think the surveyor, because usually when they shoot these things, they have to go back and forth across the river to get the lines right. So I said, I didn't think they like to get their feet wet, so rather than having to get in the water, they just walk down the property line on the edge of the stream until they got to the other corner, and then they go from there. And on my survey software, you can do that. You can incorporate that as an unknown line, and it'll automatically make the other lines close together. It doesn't like 2 unknown lines, so if it had 2 disconnected stream lines, then the software won't work. It just gives you a blank screen and you put the stuff in, but it doesn't come out right. And so I can't do 2 unknown lines, but I can do 1. But then I've got a survey example here later. I'm going to show you, well, I think Beaver Dam Creek in Western Loudoun, where the surveyor actually did the water courses. And when you try to overlay it on the map, you're going to see that it fits exactly. That it just follows that. And there's probably no other place it would fit because the stream is so funny shaped that the survey comes out perfectly well. But they had to do a lot of work to get that. But when I mentioned that this reverse line was southwest, the most common mistake in surveys, they'll shoot the line, they'll measure and change, and then when they get to the other end, they'll turn around and they'll shoot it back in the other direction to see if they got the same reading. It's 45 here. When they get to this point up here, they shoot it back here and see if it's still 45. And sometimes they'll write down that reverse call on their survey. So quite often you'll find a survey in it that has a reverse line somewhere stuck in it. And going back to the whole thing, the surveyor writes down his calls. He does a survey. And then he usually creates a plat. But when I get there, I'm looking at the courthouse as a deed. And some clerk at the courthouse has gone along and written those entries off the survey into the deed. And quite often, rarely do they put the plat in the deed. Today you would, but back in those days, they said, well, it costs an extra 50 cents or whatever to put another page in there, so I'm not paying for that. So don't bother to put the plat in there. So quite often they didn't record the plat, even though almost every time the surveyor does a survey, he's going to draw a plat to make sure it closes properly.
What's the difference between a plat and a survey?
All right, a survey is the calls of the meets and bounds. So the points are corners and the lines. That's a survey. So you write down that. I'll show you one of those in a minute. All right, that's a survey. A plat is actually a physical drawing of that form. Now I'm going to give you my next example here. Go for that falling apart. Use my crookedness, but assume these are straight lines. What kind of shape is that? Rectangle. Oh man, that's a smart reading. Triangle. See, I mean, you all probably know your stuff. See, you didn't even have Texas class. You didn't even be teaching. These are some of the most common parcel shapes that you're going to run across. All right. Rectangles and squares. What's the difference between a square and a rectangle?
Square has equal sides.
Square has equal sides. These are all 90-degree corners here. In the square or the rectangle, but the square has equal sides. Rectangles and squares are town lots. Whenever you're dealing with town property, they create a grid. I don't know how they do these crazy things with subdivisions today, and everything on curves, things like that, but anyway. I hate, they look at those things on the screen, but. They create that so they use every little square foot of space, but these are some of the most common surveys, 4 sides that you're gonna run into, 3 sides is very common. And it's very easy to draw these. When you get to ones that have those water course boundaries, and they have up to 25 or maybe 100 points on the edges of it, then drawing it by hand is going to be quite a challenge. And that's when software becomes more beneficial to us. So but these are very common shapes, and you can convert these to easily to. Now let's see if I can get the screen to come back on. It went off. All right. There's a survey. I don't know if you can read these numbers clearly or not. South 22 west, 545. South 68 east, 545. All 4 sides are 545, so that makes it a square. All right. And see, this is 22 and that's 68. What does that add up to? Am I challenging on the math now? 9. Right angle, 90-degree angle, the sum of those 2 sides is always going to be 90. So if you've got 4 sides and they're all the same distance, and they don't have a 90-degree angle, then somebody wrote down the course wrong. So instead of this being 68, maybe I thought it was 60. It can't be 60. If this is 22, it's got to be 68. So those are some of the common sense things to look. When you transcribe these ancient deeds from the pre-typewriter days or word processing days, it's all handwritten. It's quite difficult sometimes to read these gentlemen's handwriting that worked at the clerk's office. You think they'd fire them if they couldn't write properly, but anyway, some of them, maybe it's a clerk who got elected. He's the one putting it in there and he can't write. Anyway, some of them have excellent handwriting, some are kind of strange. So reading these old survey calls can be difficult, and sometimes you just transcribe the information incorrectly. Well, what if you had to go on a coffee break and you were writing down this deed, you were copying it, and you said, well, I got to go for my coffee break now. I'll come back in a few minutes and finish transcribing this deed. And you left out 3 or 4 lines in the survey, or for that matter, you duplicated a few lines in the survey. Now you're going to have a survey that doesn't close in the deed book. You don't have access to the surveyor's record, so what you've got is in the courthouse, and that's the right answer. I've got some surveys I've transcribed that look like spaghetti after I enter them in the computer. They just go in all directions. Usually if I've got one that's reversed the line, right, and said instead of being south 22 west, it was north 22 east, I quickly see the mistake there and I put the line that closes the box together. All right. So as I say, some of these things are tricks you learn from trying to do this, because when you transcribe these numbers and distances in there, sometimes I've seen deeds where it gives you this direction, but there's no points or no distance. Whether the clerk forgot to write it down, whether the surveyor didn't write it down, I don't know. But once in a while, you'll see a call that doesn't have a distance in it. And I say with my software, I can deal with one bad line, but I can't deal with multiple bad lines. So if I got one bad line, I can say unknown, and the computer will close the box. All right. There's another trick with the software that I don't know how to do in handwriting. Is this thing has an area on it. This is 1,856 acres. When I put this in the computer, I can click on a box up above on the table. It'll tell me how many acres this is. So I can say, well, that's close enough. You know, the computer says it's 1,860 acres. That's close enough for computations. in surveying, the area is the most unreliable number with deeds that you come across. As far as these meets and bounds, usually that's all correct. But sometimes you do have some errors. I was surprised that in the 1700s, it seemed like the surveyors could calculate area much better. When you have a funny shaped thing that wasn't a square or a triangle or rectangle, how they figure out the acreage, I'm not too sure. I'm sure that it takes quite a bit of work for them to do it. But here's the deed calls. Tucker was asking me about, this is the survey calls. So these are the lines from the survey. This was a grant in 1739, Lord Fairfax, Catesby Cock, of 1,856 acres. The first point is Robert Carter's line, and then it goes these 4 lines, and it doesn't tell you any other points. Now, I learned from the software, I don't have to put points in between these. But if I fail to do that, and I have a point down here somewhere, when I print it out, it'll distort where that point is. So that's just a software thing. I haven't figured out how to deal with that, but if you could have 4 points described on this, and it may actually have 4 points, because back in the early days, and there may not have been anybody on the east side of this guy's property, I don't know. All right, let me go back, you can see the survey is. All right, so Robert Carter is over here. I know Robert Carter's over here. I don't have any other calls. Surveyors use physical descriptions for points quite often. And later on, they'll give you a physical description, but they'll also give you the name of the adjoining property owner. They know that. So in this case, I didn't have anything but physical descriptions, and I didn't write them down. Because if the thing said to a white oak or to a pile of stones, you can't find that on that map. All right. It's not gonna do me any good if I have the name of the point and it's something I can't locate. So I don't write them down. But I have learned that sometimes writing them down is a smart thing to do, because the next surveyor that comes along in 1780 is going to write that tree down on there, and you look at it and you say, well, this is a white oak, and that's a white oak. Or it was 2 red cedars. If you write down the description, the surveyor is going to put that in the next survey, because the surveyors don't just go out there and survey, they go down to the courthouse and check on prior recordings. So if they know that there's a marker on that line, they'll look for it. I always find it funny when some of these deeds, I'll find one that there was where white oak used to be, there's no tree there anymore. The tree is fallen down, or somebody cut it or whatever. It's no longer there. So you see that reference in where white oak used to stand. Now there's no tree there, only a pile of rocks or something. So those descriptions can be useful in trying to match up corners on adjoining parcels. But as I say, I tend not to do that because I'm just trying to match up people's lines. So when I do it, I'm looking for those lines and saying, okay, if Robert Carter has a line, then I'm going to put it next to Robert Carter's South 22 West line. Robert Carter does have land grant over here, and it goes from Evergreen Mill all the way down almost to Mount Zion Church. Goose Creek, where Evergreen Mill Road crosses. Goose Creek is the top of Robert Carter's line, and at the end is down near Mount Zion Church, near Route 50. So now I've got a big line that's about 2,200 poles to try to match this too. Well, of course it matches against it, but where's the top and where's the bottom? The one thing about surveying is you can identify any of these 4 points, A, B, C, and D, you can plat it on that map. You can put it exactly where it is if you know where any of these points are. Because that's the mathematics of the survey. So it wouldn't take, but the problem is, if this is Robert Carter's line right here, and this is a pile of stones, and this is a rock, how are you gonna figure out where it fits? What was the answer?
Oh, I'm gonna answer that question.
Go ahead.
You mentioned A, B, C, D, and I've seen that on some of the old deeds. Is there a convention for where like is A always with the north point or?
I was talking to Anna the other day, and I don't think there is. All right, I've got a little more complicated example here on head, but I don't think the surveyor gets out of his, or gets off his horse or out of his wagon. The road's right here, and that's where he parks his wagon, he starts his survey right there. Or maybe he starts up here. I don't think there's anything about starting at a given point. You can start at any corner in a survey. You probably start at the most convenient one to you. Now, if you're trying to re-verify a prior survey, all right, you had the prior survey on this property, and now they've asked you to go out there and check it again to see if it's still the same. You probably will start from whatever the previous surveyor started with and follow it there. But no, I don't think there's any standard as to where they have to start. And that's, I was telling about putting it on the graph paper over there. If you started your example up here, and then it went up that way, you'd say, well, I better fill that piece of paper away and start again and start down here. You know, that you don't really know where to center it. And that's why one of the things I love about the software, number one, it orients it correctly. And this thing can move. I can move this around. I can move these boxes and put them next to each other. So when I'm surveying, I'm doing a whole area. So I'm doing all the parcels. It doesn't make any difference to me. But what I'm trying to show you in your examples today is how you can take this one and try to locate where it is. And I think, let's see. There we go. Anna put this on my slide for me. I didn't have this until just today. So this is a picture of the Arcola Quad. There's Gilbert's Corner. There's Arcola right there. Now, who in the audience thinks they can figure out where it belongs on that quad map? Do I have any volunteers here? Anybody want to try it? Somebody, that's why you have to be here, see, because the people on Zoom can't do this. So I got a light box over there and I got another one over here. And I want somebody to try to figure out where this plat fits on the map. There it is, on the same scale as this map. Who wants to experiment? You ready to be a guinea pig? There's the map. There's the thing, slide it around, see if you can figure out where it goes.
Is this line?
This is Robert Carter's line here, which is over here somewhere. Robert Carter owned Oaklands. And also he owned Oak Hill. All that's his land. He only had what, 12,000 acres approximately. And that's just one of his parcels. But anyway, can you see anything with it? Like that line there? Try that line. Now, the other thing when we're doing this, it has to be square with the map. So you don't rotate it because it's not going to rotate. It's got to be square with the map. So,
Well, when you say very.
I mean, you can't rotate it like that. It's got to be, this is north here, and this is north there.
Yes.
The north has always got to be at the same point. And when you've got the right answer, let me know. I only have one copy of this. Anna?
I have a question from one of the Zoom
All right.
participants. Joseph Roby asked, does Wynne use deed mapper software or something else?
I use Deed Mapper software. And mine runs on DOS. Any of y'all know what DOS is? You're shaking your heads now. Yes, I use a very old version of Deed Mapper. Today, Deed Mapper software, you can actually download these quad maps to Deed Mapper and put it on your site and map on top of the quad maps. Rather than doing my thing there, you could actually put your bases, your shapes of property right onto the quad map. And the quad map, number one, I know what the scale is, so I know, and one of the versions in the software is the 1 inch, 2,000 feet. And I know those quad maps are that. But the other part that I talk about here is both physical features like streams, put on the quad map. You've got roads, but those are current roads, those aren't ancient roads. So if a road has changed, it won't help you. But it does have roads. And it has fence lines. There's little broken red lines that are fence lines on. Quite often you'll find that those fence lines are historic property lines. And then sometimes you'll find the green. The green on there, you take it off the map, or you're going to try to see it better now. Of course, the other thing is you get turned to off. One of the blind for a while. Yeah. You can find wood lines. The one guy on this side of the property line hadn't cut his trees, but the ones on this side have. So when you look at the green on the map, sometimes the line runs right up next to the woods. Because the woods was a boundary. One guy left his trees and the other guy clear cut his land and is farming the whole thing. And that's another thing because, again, Loudoun was a rural county, but most counties were rural at one point in time. And so these quad maps give you a current picture of the landscape. Now, this one, I don't know what year that is. They have the publication dates on those. When you go on the website for USGS to order one of these maps,
1968.
you'll probably get the most current version, but they have the older versions that you can order. I think the basic map that's available to you today, the newest one is $8. Some of the older ones are more expensive. Typically, I pay sometimes like $15 for one. But I don't like the development because that's, if anything, when you're trying to locate an old property line, development just confuses the picture extensively. So if you access a older quad map before all the new homes were built, then you're going to be able to use it probably better for your purposes if you're trying to match up old lines. But you're still not going to know where that white oak is or that pile of rocks. But you can see these fence lines. And this is the plat has an angle, fence lines at an angle. So you're looking maybe for a fence line that matches up with the line of that. He's still going over here. I don't know if he's gonna make it today or not.
Just not sure.
Well, I told Anna, the reason I picked this example, because I want you to make a mistake. I intentionally did this so you would foul up.
There's a couple places where it looks like it lines up. So this one's kind of there, but off. There's also over here.
See this line right here? That's a route number there. It doesn't have names on here yet. This is Red Hill Road. Upper line of that is Red Hill Road.
So it's kind of in the right area to start.
And you were right. You were trying to line up with this, I think. But anyway, I use that example because Route 50 is on there today. Route 50 was built in 1806. There was no road there prior to Route 50 being built. All right. The line here is roughly at the same angle that Route 50 is. So most people are trying to line it up on Route 50 Because like a big red line, it looks real obvious, and you said, oh, well, that's probably where the line was. That has no bearing on the surveys, because it wasn't even there in 1739. Most of the land grants have no bearing, because they were all way before Route 50 was ever built. The main road back in those days was the old Braddock Road down the southern part of Loudoun. There are other roads, the Carolina Road, it's today Watson Road, was there. And you got close to that, and that Red Hill Road was built along the property line. Now, old Catesby Cock didn't make divisive comments about these gentlemen, but anyway, old Catesby Cock was the first clerk of the court in Prince William County when it was formed in 1731. So he was a rather prominent gentleman. First clerk, he's clerk of the court in Prince William. They created Fairfax County in 1742. Who do you think gets appointed clerk of the court? H.P. Cox. So he was the first clerk in Prince William. He was the first clerk in Fairfax. And when I mapped the land grants in Loudoun County, old H.P. Cox has about 20 land grants in Loudoun County, but he never lived in Loudoun County. He's just a land speculator, as many people were in the colonial period and still are today. That land speculation is a pretty good business to get into because land prices tend to go up over time. Kind of like investing in the stock market, right? Well, not quite the same. Anyway, so that's what a quad map looks like. And the Red Hill Road, nobody came up to look at it, but it's up. I can't even see where it is on here, but it's up here.
Right about there.
Right about there. Okay. So I was wanting people to line it up on this so I could tell them they were wrong. But the point was just to show that it's not automatically easy. All right. What Gene Shield used to say is if I want to map somebody's property early on in history, I have to do all the parcels around it. I'm going to show you that's not true, but it can be true. All right. That if a property is unique enough, it's easier to find. But if it's a simple square like that was, or a triangle, rectangle, you start seeing lines that aren't there, or you think you do. So quite often you have to do multiple parcels to identify the location of a property. Now, I think I have my map over here somewhere. You can see there it is. Now this fits. Fits inside. You can see that. I have mapped there are land grants on here and that was for. I particularly like this because my husband's on that way. I only have 5 acres, but I'm not as strong in this case in Coxwell, so. But that I'm trying to show you that. Now, this is from a deed book. 1829, I think, is the year of this. And sometimes you find plats. So Tucker, this is a plat. This is a drawing of the space. And they do have plats in some of the deed books, but most of them do not. Very few do. Today, they have a separate plat book. And y'all know Eric Larson down at the courthouse? No, okay. Well, I always tell Eric, back in the old days, the clerks actually drew these things in the books. I don't know why you have to use Xerox. You just draw the stupid map in there. You know, you can do the same thing they did. You're as smart as those guys were in 1856. But anyway, that's a plat that's drawn in the deed book. And it has the calls. A is right here. B, see they've written the C is down here at C. D is over here. E, F, G, H. So it has all the calls right on it. Now here's what from my, this is a page out of that 1860. You're in a Taverner's District book. And that parcel is on there somewhere. Anybody see where it is? That was 1829, this is 1860. There's been some change in ownership in that time period. Can you read that name right there? Craven. I think this A calls. Well, I think I have the calls here. Yeah. A is Craven's. All right, that when the surveyor started, he gave you a call and he's got a line. Oh, what's wrong with it? So A is Craven. There's 1860 and Craven's up here somewhere. I think that A is right here. Huh? Does that look like that?
Yeah.
Now see this line here? This is the wide, the property is from north to south very long. There's a straight line right here. I think these calls here are like 0 degrees or not totally the city. Here's one that's crossways, 86.5 degrees, and here's one that's north-south, north 4 west. So one of those sidelines is this, and this is probably that bottom line at the very bottom. This name here, can you read that one? Probably too small for you. That's Y-O-U-N-G. Young. That's Bob Dylan, Forever Young. All right. Anyway, so they came to Young's property. At that time, apparently Young don't always land down here. See, I've got a Young there, and got Young there. Some other people have come in there. Those Nichols from Percival got all the money. They got lots of land. And the Greggs, those Quakers, they got all of them. They riches all get out. Pancoast there. All right. Pancoast from this point to there. I think on my survey calls. Yeah, here's old Pancoast. What's his name here?
Don't recognize it.
You don't recognize it, okay. That's Pickett. That's this gentleman's name right here in the front row. He claims these people as his relatives, I don't know. I know they've been around here a while. But anyway, so there's that. So the line goes from this point right here, down here, and then down this line, across here, up there, over here, across here. Oh, excuse me. No, once you're here, up to Pickett there, up here to this road, there's a road right there. When I put these black lines, I obliterate the road. You can't tell, but there's a road right there. And then it goes back up to the beginning.
So why is that not a survey?
The survey is the calls itself. The drawing is the plat. So that's a plat. That's a map of plats. There's the plat in the software. Because what I'm trying to do is to overlay it onto the quad map to figure out where it fits. Now, I actually had to use this deed to figure out where these people were in 1860. Because once you do property, some of these people have held on to this land for a while. I live on a piece of property that my father bought in 1953. The deed said 80 acres more or less. There was no survey in it. And I'm half owner of it today, 70 plus years later. And I've got no deed for my property. The deed was made out to my father, so there hadn't been a survey or a deed for the property for 70 years. That's not uncommon that you have people that have land and keep it forever. Now, in this case, Mr. Fenton here has a large piece of that property. And back to this deed, let me flip over where it was. Yeah, Isaac Nichols is selling to Hoag's children. So the Hoag family owned it. in 1829. And the Nichols owned it before that. So Nichols had the land previous, I told you those Quaker Nichols, they got all kind of money. So I do this and then I'll overlay it onto there. And with the help of Anna, she was able to show me how to do this on the computer, because I couldn't figure it out. So there's my plat. Right there. Here's the parcels. This is one of the parcels. This is parcel map 493. If you own a piece of land on that, each parcel has a PIN number. 3 digits, 2 more, a dash, 2 more digits, a dash, and 4 more digits. Although I don't think they use the dashes anymore. Oh, keep dropping it. So the PIN number would be 493 00. Every PIN, every parcel has a PIN number, and every parcel on this map starts with 493. That just tells you that's the parcel that the sheet is on. That's their numbering system. These 2 digits here relate to the elevation and location on this map. So I guess there's numbers along here and numbers up there. So that tells you approximately where it is. And then this is just a consecutive number that they give for the parcels that are on that particular map. But anyway, so the county printed out this for me. And they had to be at the same scale. Remember, that's always an important thing to make sure. They printed it out. And so I can line that road up right here with that property line. You see, it doesn't quite match, but it does pretty well. And these up and down lines, they're still visible today. All of those lines. Can I turn that off? I can't turn that off, can I?
You can turn it off.
No, I mean, turn the red off.
Oh, no.
Okay. I actually have one of those, excuse me, I've got one of those maps. I think you guys are out here. Three copies of it. So that's the parcel lines that existed in 2014. And I can see how that survey from 1829 fits on that parcel map. And I haven't mapped any other parcels around it. Well, actually I have, but I didn't have to show you that. Can you see the line says Pickett's over there? Oh, it doesn't have names of the owners there on the property. Probably no Pickett's own any land out there today. They're not as rich as those Nichols were. They spent all their inheritance by now. So anyway, this is an example of how you can overlay an 1829 survey on a current parcel map. And I think if you look at those maps, you will see there is a line right there that it matches, and those current lines are still there. There's a lot more lines on here. See, there's a lot more of these little parcel subdivisions and whatever. But typically, some of these lines still show up today, particularly when it's a road like that. Now, the survey didn't call for a road, but there's a road there. And obviously, sometimes those old roads out in the country don't move too often. Now, all of my examples I brought today are from Western Loudoun. What's the term? Cherry-picked. I cherry-picked my examples so that they would be reasonable for you to find. I wanted you to think it was easy, even though it's not always easy that you can do this. But as I say, the more lines in a survey, the more unusual the shape is, the more likely you'll be able to match it up to existing parcel lines. If it's one of those squares or triangles or rectangles, if you wanted to take a square in the town of Leesburg and match it up with a town lot, you better do a little more research. Because you're not going to be able to find that, even if you found that plat, you're not going to be able to figure out which town lot it is, probably. Now, back in the early days, when they created the grid, they assigned numbers to those lots. And if the deed referenced the number, then you could go to the original plat and say, okay, it's in this square because it's part of that number. But after about 20 years, they stopped making any reference at all to the original town numbers. So you don't have anything to go on. You just have to use the chaining of the property, which that's the next class, right, in May on deed research. But I do have some examples. This is the end of my slides. I do have some examples for y'all to experiment with. You didn't all jump up when I did the Arcola quad a while ago, but I do have the examples. So I've got some examples here. One thing I did when I was doing this was I wrote down the tile number on the piece of paper so I wouldn't have you trying the wrong one. I realized that I couldn't tell from looking at it which one was on. I had to keep going to my cheat sheet so I could look at the right on there. So let's come here and experiment with this one.
Come to Ron, so sweet.
Yeah, I'll try it.
There's the. Hey.
Yes, question? I think we can.
Yes, we have a question. Mike from Cincy would like to know, has Wynne or anyone tried to map the original 32 deed owners of the 1772 Taylor subdivision surrounding Hillsborough?
Oh, yes, I've done that. Yeah. The Taylor subdivision is along the Mountain Road 690 and Short Hill Mountain. It's on the east side of Short Hill Mountain. And I have mapped that when I did my 1860 map. I had to actually start from those lots because, again, the fact that you can match these lines up with current lines with ancient lines, that over the years, that's the way property is sold. You may sell a whole piece of property, or you may sell a piece of that property. But if you sold like a piece of it, you're going to probably cut it in two, either north, south, or east, west. And so you're going to find those other lines are still going to be there today. You're going to see those. So when Taylor did a subdivision, it's in, Pat Duncan did a transcription of the deeds. It's in her first book from 1757 to 1800. And she's got a picture of the Taylor plat near the front of that book. And I've worked on the Taylor plat. One of the things that hits you over time in doing research is multiple lot owners. My friend in the second row there, Tucker Withers, owns multiple lots in the village of Aldi. So when you're trying to chain a title, it can confuse you sometimes because you get on the wrong lot. Well, back in the 1700s, what was the name of that family? Now I'm going to draw a blank here. It's not Kilgore. Hillside, Ithaca? Who's the? You're not help me, girl there.
Give me more information.
Anyway, there was this one family in the Hillsborough area, east of Hillsborough, and this guy probably owned over 2,000 acres of land. And so when I was trying to do my 1860 maps, he died before that, and his children inherited the land. But I never could find a division of the property to show who got what. That, when I've given you examples of surveys, you don't need a survey in the deed to make it a good deed. There's no need to have a survey in a deed. Why would you want a survey? The survey is to ensure the guy that's selling you the property knows where his lines are, and so you don't get into a land dispute with one of the neighbors. He says, oh, that's my field. They said, no, that's their field. And now you are going to court to argue with your neighbors. So you're trying to avoid that by getting a legal survey done to prove where your lines are. Well, if you're selling the land to your son, or you're leaving it to your daughter, you don't need a survey. I got a fence over there, or they know that old tree is the corner of my property. You know, we don't put a survey in the will, we don't put a survey in the deed, because it's what they call non-arm's length. You're selling to a relative or some son-in-law or something. You're selling to somebody that doesn't need the survey, so you don't bother to pay for it. Surveyors charge money. Need all surveyors in here? I don't want to insult anybody now. Anyway, I used to have an office in Fairfax, and the floor below me were surveyors. And they would bring in all these wooden stakes that they would use to mark the corners of their surveys when they went out and did them. And those things get left outside and they get wet, and that wet wood, I can smell that every time I come in the building with these stakes. But I never have done surveying. I've never actually been involved in it, but just as we were talking about the water things there a while ago, there's some real challenges out there in a survey. You get to go out there on a nice day, but not every day is a nice day, and you still have to go out there and run your survey lines. Today, they don't have to deal with the change. They use a viewfinder and they shoot a line, and it tells them how far it is. The guy's out there holding a pole and says, okay, that's so many feet from here to there. So they don't have to lay a chain down like they historically did, but there's still challenges to the survey work, and most surveyors do an excellent job. And I love the plats. When I go through and do these things, I never copy the deeds. I don't go to the clerk and say, make me a copy of this deed. I just transcribe the calls from the survey and put it on a piece of paper. I said, well, I don't need a copy of it. There's nothing in there that's exciting to me. All I need to know is from, how many acres, the date, and the survey calls, and that's it. So I don't copy the deed, but if there's a plat in it, I usually get a copy of that. And when I try to do them out, it's nice to have the plat. So when you do this thing, you know it's right. Because if I wrote the calls down wrong, I can't really figure it out very easily. But if I got the plat, I can go back and see where I made my mistakes. You know, so the plat is a visual image of what the survey is. And so if you have a plat in the deed book, yes, it's very handy to have that with you when you're trying to create one of these, so that you know you did it right. Because if I wrote down any of those lines wrong, it ain't gonna come out right. You see this thing up here? It doesn't close. That's what we say, doesn't close. There's a small space between here and there. So somewhere in this thing, there's some error in the survey that it doesn't close. But usually if it's a real good survey, these things will be on top of each other. Those 2 points there. The first point and the last point will match right up. Because the last line is always says from here to the beginning, usually what it says.
When you start your research, does it always start in the same place? So in other words, if you were to come back out to Warren County, would you start your research in the same departments and places that you did in Loudoun County?
My technique, and again, I'm trying to do a whole area. So I'll answer your question, but again, I'm not sure that the average person that's taking this class or I'm talking to is ever going to try to do what I've been doing. But that when I go to an area, the first thing I do is get a list of the taxpayers. Everybody who pays property taxes is listed in the Commissioner of Revenue's records. And historically, they listed them alphabetically. Within each district, each commissioner has their own book, and they list them in that district alphabetically. And it gives you a very brief description of location. And it gives you the amount of acres. So I'll transcribe the person's names and the acres and the location designation. Now, they also have distance from the courthouse in the old records. So they're north 10 miles from the courthouse, or they're northwest 8 miles from the courthouse. I normally don't transcribe those initially. All right, I rely upon the listing. But the other thing I do is I start looking at the big ones. All right, when I go and work on these projects, how many acreage I can do is important to me. One time in Fauquier County, I did over 100,000 acres in one day. All right. But when I worked in Clark County, my goal was to try to get 3,000 acres a day. So if it's 100,000 acres, that means I'm going to make 30 trips to Clark County if I can get it on my 3,000 acre average. I don't do parcels under 10 acres because they're so small on this quad map. So every lot has to be at least 10 acres or more. But I'll transcribe the names from the tax list when I start. And then I'll go look at the names. Now let's see, when I did Warren County, I'm trying to think of the name now. I picked out a name that I knew in Warren County as a prominent name in the time of 1860. And I looked them up in the index first. So I started with this one, and then I quickly got off of that because they had lots and lots of deeds. But what I try to do in my approach to it is I'll take the biggest ones first. I'll look them up in the deed index prior to 1860. Because if you got the land, your deed's going to be recorded prior to 1860, if you own in 1860. But you may not have a deed. You may have got it from inheritance. The ones I hate are the ones that get through their wives. When a man in 1860 married a woman, he owned her property. And the tax man had him listed in the tax list. There's no deed to him. There's no deed to anybody with his last name. Well, there may be deeds to people with his last name, but you're not going to find that property because his wife owned it. I was working on a property down in Prince William County. I've alluded from your answer to some degree, but I try to start with the largest ones because I'm concerned about how many acres I get. I measure my success and what percentage of them. In Loudoun County, I probably did 85% of them. I have places on the map where I have people I didn't identify. That's one reason why I picked places like this as my example, because I did real well on this. I tried harder out here because of this guy. He's my double great grandfather. And so I said, well, I'm going to do better in Jonah Tavner's district than I did in Wren's. One of the other things I found in mountain lots, you don't have any fences running up through the mountains. It's all green wood. The USGS quad maps don't help you a whole lot in the mountains in trying to place lines. Now, the parcel maps will, but the quad maps aren't very helpful in wooded mountainous area. Warren County's got Shenandoah National Park. I've got some blank spaces on my map over in Warren and the Shenandoah National Park because you just don't have any good lines to plat to because today it's all owned by the federal government. And so when you have a large area that's all been owned for a long time by one person, Prince William County, I did the northern part of Prince William County. I didn't do the southern, partly because I'm not as interested in the people who live south part of Prince William, but also Quantico Marine Base is there and Prince William Forest Park. And doing the maps in those areas is gonna be a real challenge. So I said, well, I just won't bother to do it then, won't get frustrated about the fact that I can't do it. So I walked away from that, but yes, I tried to work on the biggest properties first. Are y'all familiar with, shoot, now I'm drawing another blank. Carter's, house there in, Millwood.
Carter Hall,
Carter, you familiar with Carter Hall, Millwood?
for sale.
That's one of the richest people in Clark County in 1860 owned that. I never could figure out where the meets and bounds were. I was totally frustrated by that. That man owned 3,000 acres and I couldn't find the meets and bounds of it. All right. I did find the meets and bounds for like 180 acres. They sold in 1930, but where the mansion is, but it's like, I could not find the edges of his property. And I hate to make it up. With that software, I can create a parcel out of thin air. You know, I can say, oh, I think this is where the line is, that's where the line is. And I can make the lines fit to these other parcels and figure out how much acres it is and says, well, that's probably it. But if I don't have a source, I don't like to do that. I can't say I've never done that, but I don't like to do it because I'm creating history. I'm not documenting what I found. And so I hate to do that. I've got one parcel on this Fox's thing where I actually did everybody around it and said the guy in the middle was owned all the rest of the land, but I never could find a deed for him to show what his boundaries were. So again, in all of this, there's a lot of ifs and buts. One thing I didn't mention, I did talk about magnetic declination. When you have iron ore in the ground, that throws off the compass. A lot of iron ore is in these mountainous areas, so back to the woods, that's adding to the problem. But there are other places where there's iron ore, and when you have metals in the ground that can throw the compass off, sometimes these survey readings are just terrible shape because there was magnetic. When I did the land grants for Fauquier, I had a lot of that problem in southern Fauquier. I'm not sure because the soil was wet or what, but it seemed like a lot of the early survey calls were just bad, just totally bad. But again, you do have problems that the surveyor encountered that he couldn't overcome, because if there's iron ore in there and throwing his compass off, he doesn't know it. And if it does throw it off, he doesn't know what percentage it is, if he did know it was there. Do I have any other questions, Anna?
I think it's a comment from earlier when you were talking about Front Royal and I believe larger parcels. Mary Hack says McKay's ? North of Front Royal near Cedarville ?
That's one of the early settler families.
McKay's.
I'm wondering if that was the big plot of land that you would use as your point.
Oh, yeah, when I was talking about the big one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what she was.
No, I was talking about a place outside of Hillsborough when I was talking about the large, but there, on my 1860 listing for Warren County, I probably have over 100 parcel listings for the McKays.
Yeah.
All right, and different McKays, but they're all related. It's all part of a larger family. So, and that's something over time. Again, most of these large tracts early on, like Catesby Cox, old Catesby Cox back to his 1856. I said he never lived in Loudoun County. He never lived on any of this land. He was just speculating. There was a fellow from New Jersey. Last name's Allen. And he bought the top 900 acres. It runs right across the top of that parcel there. He bought 900 acres. And that's where that Red Hill Road is. So the Allens own Red Hill Farm, which gives the name to Red Hill Road. So that was the Allens farm. He came here from New Jersey about 1750 or 60, something like, no, I think it was after Loudoun was created, so maybe 1760. So Allen came down here and bought 900 acres out of him, and then he started selling off other pieces, and they were all in squares and rectangles. So putting it together, I had a challenge with that one time. I did that just for the sheer challenge of it, to see if I could figure it out. But yeah, it's just like the Talo thing. The Talo thing, I thought that I found that as a challenge, that hey, here's a list of all these parcels. Most of the lines you can still see today where these original division lines were, and to see if I could just figure out who got what. And you go through the deeds, eventually you'll find the deed for it. You don't know who you're looking for, but you know who the grantor has to be. So yeah, I was able to, I've got that on my computer at home, listing all the Taylor buyouts for his land. I still haven't followed the name, but it's one of those things that comes to me. But he lived at Ithaca and the graveyard's there. Go ahead, Tucker.
What's the definition of meets and bounds? That's just the.
Meets and bounds, bounds is the lines,
Okay,
and meets are the points or corners.
okay,
You need both of those to do the survey. And if you know the meets and bounds, then you can draw a survey, or you can draw a plat from the survey. And I showed you how to do that back here, when you already knew which way the northwest, east, and south in. And how to do the lines. One of the things that I used to be able to do, I can't do anymore, is look at this map and tell you how many acres, let's say this is. Because I know the scale of the map, so I can say, oh, that's 356 acres, whatever, 350 acres. I was pretty good at it, but now I haven't done it for a while, so I can't quite look at a map and do that anymore, but I used to be able to do that. And when I do the survey lines, I can look at the calls and say, okay, this is north 4 west, because that had to be a small number. That's almost due north. So it's like anywhere from 0 to 5. So I know that, and I know what's east west. So when you look at lines in a survey, knowing, your direction, it helps you start orienting where things have to fit. But yes, back to that gentleman's question. When I did this work here, this doesn't exist. This is original research, and it's only at the Balch Library that you find this. And I have a friend named Taylor Chamberlain. He said, "Why aren't you going to publish that as a book?" I said, "No, I want people to come to the Balch Library and use the library. I'm trying to help the library get patrons." Now, not everybody knows these things are in the library, but I find people doing property research and historical research find these and genealogical research find these very helpful. The one thing that really surprised me, and I never anticipated it, one of the biggest users of this is cultural research forms. When people sell land in Loudoun County for development, they have to do what they call a phase 1 study, and they hire a cultural resource firm to research the history of the property. It's to determine whether there's any archaeological resources there or historic resources there that may be disturbed by the development. So they do a study and they go through and do a chain of title and research the property and do maps and stuff and overlays. And they always come in here and check my maps out because I've already done 1860 for them. And I showed them, I give them the deed reference. I give them the size of the property so they know where the property is already, because they're doing the cultural research on a location that they have. But they don't know the 1860 deed. They wouldn't find that out until they changed the property back. And in the class that I'm teaching on the deed research in May, I'm not trying to sell the class, but under Virginia law, when they do title searches, they're only required to do 60 years. That's 1963. They don't have to go back any further than 1963, and they've done the legal chain of title research. There's a lot of owners prior to 1963, but title examination firms don't care about it unless you pay them to do that additional research, that they're not going to research beyond that 60 years because it's considered a legal title to the property, and you can borrow money from the bank with their work just for 60 years. You don't have to go back any further because the assumption is any liens on the property or right-of-way issues will have been resolved in that period of time, that there won't be anything older than that. Yes.
Why does the magnetic north change? You said it changed, magnetic north will
You
change.
think I'm a scientist?
It's got to do with the spinning of the core, your little wobbles kind of constantly. And every so many hundreds or thousands of years, it will flip. So with the North Pole right now, we're actually in the process, I think, of it starting to flip. We'll actually switch to the South Pole.
I don't think we'll live that long with him.
Right, you're saying 20 to 40.
Anna?
Yes, Joseph Roby asked, were you ever able to plat Carter Hall / Millwood? And then another, second part to the question, if I can't find a survey, what are the best ways to work around it?
Well, the answer is no. I was not able to plot Carter Hall, and I found that frustrating because, as I say, the gentleman that owned it at the time was one of the largest landowners in Clark County in 1860. And as I said, that other gentleman left, I always focus in on the big parcels because I feel like I'm getting more success. Is there any way around it? Back to Gene Shields' theory is that you do the adjoiners. If you can map the adjoiners, then in theory, everything else inside is the other person's land. All right. But you don't know that there aren't little slivers of other people's property in that portion. See, that's the total uncertainty of it. Now back to the mapping, as I said, you can create a plat. There's a place called Audley over in Clark County. Audley was divided in 1860 to the heirs of the Lewis family. And they're all listed in the tax list with their names and how many acres they own. Now it's all part of Audley, and I think the numbers in the tax are just a division, a numerical division of the ownership. So that it's not like this one got 100 acres and this one got 60 acres. I think it's all divided by 8, and that each one's got 1/8 of the acreage. But I couldn't, the plat that did Audley was in the chancery suit, and I never could find the chancery suit. That's another problem in Clark County. But anyway, couldn't find the chancery suit. There was a chancery suit because I found it in the chancery book referring to it. So I know there is a chancery suit, I just couldn't find the suit. So I never could find the plat that should have been in the suit. But I used all the adjoining properties and I platted it based upon that. So I do have Audley mapped out, but I never found a survey for that. But that's again how you would do it, is by all the adjoining parcels. And in most of the adjoining parcels, if you have all of the deeds, it'll tell you who the adjoiner is usually on that other side. So you will know that it's part of the Lewis's land. But again, that's one of the times I was working in Clark County. I'm not Clark, Fauquier County. Fauquier County has a big bank of things where they have all the tax books year by year, starting in 1861 and going up to the current tax year. And typically I'm working backwards to find a deed. But if you can't work backwards to find a deed, you can work forward and find a deed. So I started pulling the books off on this one property I was working on. I got up to 1920 and I still hadn't found a deed with a survey. And I went 60 years afterwards and I still couldn't find. I think I found the property changing hands, but I never found a deed with a survey in it. So I couldn't map the parcel, and I felt frustrated that I spent so much time trying to do it. But sometimes you convince yourself that you're going to be able to do something and you will never give up on it until you've totally failed. So I wasted time sometimes on a project, but I tend to, I work from the largest first, and I'll go through and I'll look them up in the deed book. And if I find a reference to them buying property in the deed book, they're the grantee, then I'll write their name down and the deed reference. And maybe there's 5 references for this person, all right? Then I'll go look up each one of those deeds and see if the acreage matched anything on the tax man's list. And when I have one that matches, I'll go transcribe those meets and bounds calls because I know I need that one. But if I have some others whose numbers don't match up with anything on the tax record, I won't necessarily copy the calls down because I'm not sure I'm ever going to use it. I had one over in Fauquier County I did one time. The guy only had 3 references in the deed book. And every one of them, the acreage in that matched the tax list. That's the only time that's ever happened to me, when there was a person had multiple pieces of property, that every deed just jumped right into the tax list. Now, this guy apparently hadn't moved there till about 1850. So all of his deeds were within 10 years of 1860, but typically people who have multiple pieces of land also sell land. So you got a deed here for 300 acres. I got 230 on the list. Somewhere he sold 70, but I didn't know when or where. So I would have had to found that 70 piece before I could have decided how to map the 230 that he still had left of the original 300 he bought. So that's the other thing with property. You add together, you subtract from it. And so it changes numbers sometimes. And another problem I have with the tax listings is that over the years, the commissioners, to save time, let's say a person owns 10 pieces of property, but they're not selling any. They just keep buying additional land. They'll add those 10 numbers up. And next year they'll have that one total on the tax list. So you have to go to those prior years' assessments to find those individual numbers. There's no individual deed for 1,500 acres, but maybe he had 10 deeds that added up to 1,500 acres. So, but if you go back to that older list before they consolidate them, you'll find those individual listings. And usually when they're on the tax list, they're chronological. So I bought one in 1823, it's at the top. I bought another one in 1825, it's right underneath that. You know, they chronologically list them. So when you find multiple listings on the tax list, those tend to be chronologically listed by the assessor. He doesn't jump around, he puts them on there. I've seen where they've added ones together that they thought were contiguous that weren't. They thought the two pieces of land were adjoining, so they figured, well, we'll just list it as one number, when they actually weren't. It was two different pieces that are separated from each other, but it's a one number on the tax list. So I've seen that as well. So you have various issues as far as the tax record guy keeping his list. I talked to a lady, Jane Covington, the other day. She was doing work on old road cases for roads relative to mill sites. And I said in Loudoun, there were 3 districts. Tavener almost always lists the name of the mill as a location site somewhere in his district. So if I'm Bob Jones and I own 30 acres that the mill's on, he'll say Jones's Mill, and it'll be 30 acres, whatever. That, but in eastern Loudoun, I didn't see that, and even in northern where Fox is, I didn't see that. Now there's not that much water in the east to have mills. There's very few mills east of Goose Creek because Broad Run doesn't have enough water in it to power too many mills. But Tavener I could use to actually identify where most of the mills were just from the tax list. So there's some things. One of the things I ran into, I guess it's both Clark and Prince William, they referred to property by name. And most farms had a farm name. All the wealthy people anyway had names for their farms, and those names are in the tax records. But Loudoun didn't do that, nor did Fauquier. So those farm names, people ask me if I know where such and such farm is. I said, no, I've never even heard of it, you know. But in Prince William, they actually would use those names in 1860, and Clark did the same thing. So Marty Hyatt gave me a list over in Clark of all these historic homes in Clark County, and almost every one of them shows up in the tax list, you know, on the being owned by a given person. So there's different things, even dealing with 1860 and adjoining counties in Virginia. The law required the records to be maintained in the same way, but there is some local variables about how that was done by the different commissioners. Are you falling asleep over there, Crew? Oh, okay. Well, then I better quit that. I'm getting too boring. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank everybody online for listening, and hopefully I'll see a few of you in May. If not, I'll see you in the courthouse, right? Research.
No, about 9 days north. It's up there now.
Yeah.
And Wynne says it will shift.
Yeah, so it always wobbles a little bit, from year to year.
Access codes, yeah, right.